Hi, students. I want to go over this lesson 2 and talk about what is science. So, science is basically taking something that you observe or see and testing it and not being biased ahead of time and seeing what conclusions you can draw from that, and then testing again and again and starting the process over and over. So this is a volcanologist, somebody that is testing different volcano components. So there's a difference between a theory and a law. And these two do not run into each other. So theories don't become laws, and vice versa. A theory is just what it says here. It's an explanation of natural phenomena, something that you see that's supported by many observations and then tested by experiments over time. So basically, it's something that they can't seem to disprove, and it's been looked at by lots of scientists over time. A law describes a relationship of two things in nature. So, a law, for example, would be the law of conservation of energy, that if I have a log and I go and burn that log, that the amount of energy in the log to begin with is how much energy is given off after you burn it. And it is now heat instead of wood, but it's the same amount of energy. So, it's a relationship between two things. So scientists do a few things. They make observations about things that they see, and then they draw conclusions. And they use cool tools and different things for each study that you do. They also expand knowledge and try to increase the amount of knowledge out in the world. So there's a few types of um, knowledge, I guess, that are not science. They imitate science. And that is listed here. They're called pseudosciences or fake science. Astrology, horoscopes, psychic readings, tarot cards, face readings, palmistry. These are not science information. This isn't science information. Little research is done, and it's not based on testable um, hypotheses. Okay, so they're not science based. Then scientists actually always challenge accepted theories. So they make sure that they don't always just trust that something like salt increases your blood pressure. They don't always like rely on that. They'll look for anything that shows that that's not true. So they constantly are retesting things and reevaluating. Um, then they question the results. This is one of my favorite parts about science. People often think that scientists have big egos, and I have gotten to do a lot of scientific research out in the field. A few years ago, I was actually researching in Borneo in a rainforest, and I was researching primates. And throughout the summer, as I conducted my research, I had all these different PhD doctorates, just trying to poke holes in my research and trying to tear it apart. And I used to, a long time ago, have a hard time with that kind of process. But I actually have learned that I love that process now. And the reason why is then the research that you do create is actually stronger because it's now withstood everybody trying to tear it apart, and you've fixed all the mistakes, and you just have a better product in the end. So here would be an example of a bad conclusion. If you look at the shape of these three limbs, some people might think, oh, a bird, it must be related to a bat because they have a wing. They both have the wings. But in looking at that further and further, we see that actually the bones of a bat are more related and or similar to the bones of a human. And in fact, bats and human are more closely related because they're both mammals, whereas a bird is a bird. It's not a mammal. So these two are actually more closely related. So you have to look and dig and not just find the obvious. So scientists test claims that people make a claim and they'll say, maybe this helmet prevents people from getting concussions. So they do their best to test that out before they give it to players and have them risk injury. And scientists undergo peer review. This is a little bit what I was talking about in pulling apart each other's work, and retest to make sure that people have valid claims. Um, so scientists in daily life affect us all over the place, but here's a really cool DNA set. If you ever get to go to San Diego Zoo Safari Park, we do one lab there called Condor Research, but you can see these two DNA sets here actually match up their DNA all along the way. So these two DNA strands here, this is one little time where it wasn't as dark on one side as the other and up here. But other than that, they match all along the way. This DNA strand and this one are from the same person. We'll talk about that more later. And then, of course, you can see that this DNA strand here has a partner too. Which DNA strand matches this one? It is this one on this side matches. So it's interesting. We'll learn more about DNA later. So there's ways that you can be scientifically literate and learn more about science, and that's by studying like works that are made or studies or papers. You can also develop your critical thinking skills. There's different ways of looking at evidence. There's empirical evidence, meaning that it's just the explanations from the observations that you had, or looking at answers that seem sort of obvious. There's logical reasoning where you conclude one, if this is true, then this also must be true. Scientists will do experimental tests, and they'll also make observations. Most of the time, they do all of those. So that is all you need to go over for this section.